Okay, let's have an honest conversation here. What were some things that I wish I knew before starting a podcast? A lot. The podcasting world can be very daunting, and that's why I wanted to share with you this honest review in this video. Hi, I'm Jennifer Lee, and let's talk about what we want to know. What did I not know that I wish I knew before starting a podcast? I wish I knew everything before starting a podcast because there are so many elements that you don't even know. And if you start Googling things about podcasts, it can be very overwhelming. And the biggest thing that I think I take away from that is that you got to tune out the noise, because there are a lot of things that you can use that most people do put into standard practice, but there's a lot of things that only work for other people's podcasts. Podcasts, after doing them for like 5 years now, I noticed that some things work for others, some things don't work for others. So the thing is, not every podcast is the same. Some people do things with their podcasts that are very successful, and if you were to emulate that, it might not be as successful for you. Every podcast is unique. How you promote it is unique. Yes, there's certain things that you need to do when creating a podcast that are standard, but other than that, they're very different from each other. So be kind to yourself, and let's go on this podcasting journey together. More things that I wish I knew before I started was their slow growth. They're very slow growth, and that's okay. You just got to keep doing it. And sometimes it's hard because you're like, oh, no one's going to listen to it. Or you feel like you're doing it and you're looking at the listens and there's not many people listening, and you're like, it's not great. But I'll tell you, I had a client one time, and that's happened to her a few times, and she was in this space, the health and wellness space, and she was doing a podcast and people were listening to it. And it wasn't a huge audience, but people were listening to it. And, we'd have discussions all the time. She's like, oh, my numbers aren't that high or whatever. And then she'd get these phone calls from people, and they would be like, I'm coming to see you. And she lived in a northern town in Alberta. And they were like, I'm going to drive 3 hours to see you. And she's like, well, I do my services virtually. And they're like, no, I listened to your podcast and I connected on an episode you talked about your mother. Now I want to come meet you. And that happened to her a few times. So even if you don't feel like you're getting anything from it, it's going to happen. It's just not going to maybe be like billions of people, but that's okay because you're helping someone out that you don't even know. A lot of times when I was on the radio, it's very lonely, I'll be honest. You don't think anyone's listening. Yes, you get all the metrics of like you've listened this much and like there's a lot of people there, but it's really hard because you don't hear any feedback. And then when you leave a radio station, people are like, oh, I really missed you. I wish you were there. So it's the same with podcasting. Just give yourself some time. Another thing that I wish I knew before starting a podcast is making sure to have the right virtual studio. When I first started, there weren't as many virtual studios out there that there is now. I was using a meeting software. Meeting software, though, is great for meetings, but the sound quality isn't very good. The nice thing about virtual studios, if you're doing a virtual podcast, is you're able to set it up so you have different tracks and you can use echo cancellation on your guests, and the sound quality is just a lot better. And now they're coming out with different tools that will help you edit and things like that if you don't know how to do it. I luckily knew how to edit because I come from a broadcasting background, but now these programs are making it so much easier for you to start. Something else I wish I knew before starting a podcast is just how much time it takes you to do it. And if you could have a team that you could pay, it would be awesome. But there's so many different things like editing, posting it on the hosting platform, setting it up on the hosting platform so you can get it onto Apple and Spotify. I think that was a big thing too. That's another one, is not knowing exactly what a hosting platform is. Now a lot of us know Buzzsprout, Spotify for podcasters, all that stuff. And there's a lot of videos on them, but a hosting platform and understanding how and why you need to be on a hosting platform and how that gets you onto Apple and how that gets you onto Spotify is so important, because even I didn't know. I was just like, oh, well, I have a podcast, but like, what's an RSS feed? And I came from broadcasting and I was like, how do I get this out there? And it sounds magical. And it's like, oh, you got to have a hosting platform. It's going to make your life a lot easier. And there are free ones out there as well. So knowing that whole world, that there's free ones like Spreaker out there, like there's Spotify for podcasters out there. I didn't know all that. So that was a really important thing to figure out. And then another thing is like promoting your podcast. And again, this kind of goes back to the one size doesn't fit all thing, is the fact that when people promote their podcasts, some people have better luck on LinkedIn, some people have better luck on YouTube. It just really depends where your audience lives. Everyone's audience is unique. So if your audience lives on LinkedIn, that's where you want to put all your time and effort. The thing is, you can't do a strategy where you just kind of throw everything at the wall, because that's not how podcasting works. Your audience is on different platforms. Maybe it's on your mailing list. Like, where is your audience live and how do you get to them is so important. Because again, if you Google all this stuff, you're going to sit there and get inundated and get stressed out and be like, I'm not doing this, I'm not doing that. Well, this person does this and this person does that. Again, you gotta make it work for yourself. So those are all the things that I wish I knew before starting a podcast. I probably want to admit to you at this point, but please, this is, I want you to comment. I want you to give me your feedback about starting a podcast, because we're all in this together. No one is perfect at this. I even have a broadcasting background and I'm not perfect at this. We just got to figure out what works. The industry is still very young and podcasting isn't saturated. And I guess that's another thing that I thought when I first started that was kind of something that was myth busted for me, was the fact that it's not saturated. There's still a lot of growth in many areas. And if you do your research before you start your podcast and look at the area you want to go into, you will notice that in a lot of the genres out there that there's not a lot of live podcasts at those areas, and there's still a lot of room for you. So I want to leave you with that piece of wisdom, that if you are being timid about starting a podcast and you're like, I don't know what I should do, or I don't know if I should do this because it's saturated. If you have a really great idea and you're passionate about it, start it. And I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for listening. Please hit the bell for more notifications. Please comment below. Love to keep this conversation going. What did you not know that you wish you knew before you started a podcast? Bye.